Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Footy Rewind. Thank you all for your support in episode 1 as I continue to embark on this project. Today I start a new series called Footy Beef. Just how do you respond when you're told to merge with another club? For FOOTSCRAY 1989, it was a return to the true working class roots which wasn't lost in an ever-evolving world, and it meant a return back to the rugged football of old to ruffle the feathers of the established powers in the AFL. It was a time when the Bulldogs said enough is enough, and made a powerful statement that they wouldn't be pushed around anymore. This is FOOTSCRAY versus the world. It was supposed to be a done deal, they said. Ross Oakley finally got his vision of merging two Melbourne clubs together to expand the league, they said. Except no one told the people of Footscray that's how the script was meant to go. Instead, an 18-day campaign to rip the script saw the vision of the Fitzroy Bulldogs finished off by a fundraising drive the VFL had never seen. With the Doggies in massive debt, having seen Michael Malthouse leave his post as coach of the club, the VFL saw fit to put the Dogs together with Fitzroy. A similarly struggling club, but one with a bit more tendency to make money. It looked more akin to a takeover, and the Footscray faithful responded. In just 18 days, the Dogs raised around $1.5 million, an incredible triumph of the power of the people. Bumper stickers proclaiming "Up Yours Oakley" became the hottest property in the western suburbs. Terry Wheeler became a new coach for the Bulldogs, and the VFL now had to accommodate the Bulldogs in their planning for 1990 and a renamed AFL competition. So the Bulldogs were saved, but what were the next steps? How would the Bulldogs go from 13th in 1989 back to a top 5 contender? See, out of all the clubs in the league, no club arguably stays as true to their roots as Footscray. Located in the heart of the working class western suburbs, the Bulldogs have brought out names famous for their relationship with the working class. For example, Ted Whitten, Charlie Sutton and later Dougie Hawkins. By 1990, the Dogs needed to build up a list that could compete and once again look to the west of the state. Chris Grant and Leon Cameron were two such products, while Tony Liberatore made the move from neighbouring North Melbourne, and such was his impact, he won the 1990 Brownlow medal. The Bulldogs did rebound following their fight for survival, even if it was a 3-year process in the end. From 6.5 wins in 1989, the Dogs won 12 games in 1990, including this famous win over eventual Premier Collingwood, with Steve Collingwood kicking the winner. In some weeks they even spent some time in the top 5, an achievement thought impossible at the start of October 1989, like it simply wasn't meant to happen. 9.5 wins in 1991 was a slight backward step, but the pieces were still there to contend. This leads us to the brilliant 1992 season. You're probably wondering where the beef is at this point. Don't worry, it's a couple minutes away, but back to the background. In 1992, the Dogs had their best year in 31 years. They finished second after the home and away games, missing out on top spot only on percentage to Geelong, who scored at the most ridiculous rate at roughly 130 points per game, which we'll probably never see again. Anyway, the Dogs bowed out of a preliminary final to the Cats, but not before taking out this finals win against St Kilda the week before. This is their first win in a final in 7 years. Further positives came when Scott Wine won the Brownlow. It was the second in 3 years for the club. It was truly a fairy tale year, but all at the club were aware that public sentiment wasn't going to get them a flag alone. It was time to play for harder edge. This is where the Footscray versus the world beef comes in. We now knew that the Dogs had their bark back. This is the day they reintroduced their bite, and it's a bite that remains savage for the best part of 10 years. It starts with Stephen Wallace, father of current player Mitch, getting red-headed with what would have been a fair hip and shoulder. However, the Eagles, who go on to win the premiership, don't like it. It escalates, and Danny Southern gets Brett Sumich in a brutal chokehold, which sees the latter struggle to breathe. While the Dogs eventually wound out in straight sets in the 1994 finals, and went down a ladder in the ensuing 2 years, the message would soon become clear. Don't mess with us.
Hip and shoulder. Oh, it's on. There's a bit of a blue on here at the moment. From everywhere. Footscray. They need something like that. Fair, but Heady is going to be carried on with a stretcher. This is looking ugly at the minute.
Well, the Eagles players, well, both sides would be stupid to get too involved with the Eagles finals coming up.
All the club needed was somebody to harness that. And boy, didn't they find him.
I don't know about you guys. Like, if I see one bloke walk out of here, getting a pat on the back from people out there for a good effort, I'll spew up. Because it's just not acceptable. We were rebel in that first quarter. Absolutely bloody disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. Yeah, 3 quarters. We worked our asses off. We worked our backsides off to get back into the game. But the game is about 120 minutes of footy, and that was the most winnable one that we'd get for a long time, and we just pissed it down the drain. We absolutely pissed that game down the drain. Don't any one of you forget about it.
I mean, that's just rubbish. Yeah? Another disappointing performance here, and they will be locking the gates to keep the fans in. That is trash. That is well, it's a throwaway line that people read. It's a throwaway line that people read. Absolute trash, Jeff. Absolute trash. You want to be let into our rooms, we don't see any more of this crap or you won't be in.
While Wheeler and Alan Joyce were able to engineer regular finals appearances for the Bulldogs, Terry Wallace was the man who set about getting the Dogs as close as they had ever got to a drought-breaking premiership that stretched back to 1954. All the ingredients were there. A terrific midfield which included the likes of Scott West, Jose Romero and Tony Liberatore, a strong defensive unit including Danny Southern, Leon Cameron and Matthew Croft, a forward line with Chris Grant, Brad Johnson and James Cook, and a strong ruck division in Scott Wine and Luke Darcy. Wallace's game plan? To be as tough as possible in the contest and to not be intimidated by the opposition. It certainly worked as the Bulldogs vaulted up the ladder. At this time, the Doggies were working on their brand. They changed their name, controversially, from Footscray to the Western Bulldogs, and played their final game out of a Whitten Oval in 1997. That game was a truly spiteful affair, and one of the first times Wallace's Bulldogs well and truly flexed their muscle. Legend has it that Wallace watched #1 draft pick Michael Gardner the week before, and ordered players to rough him up. Southern, Steve Crediuk and Craig Ellis responded. It's said that Southern greeted Gardner by telling him, "Welcome to the kennel." Although those 3 players were fined on a ruling which saw the tribunal cite them for aggressive and intimidating behaviour, the ploy worked. The Dogs won by 3 goals, and Gardner had a poor game. The Dogs' aggressive game style also claimed another victim, Chris Grant and his unlucky Brownlow miss in 1997. Grant polled the most votes in a home and away season, but a controversial tribunal charged at a midway point of the season saw him suspended for 1 week, which made him ineligible for the medal, which Robert Harvey accepted. The suspension was not worthy of the report on game day by the umpires, but AFL Footy Operations Manager Ian Collins decided to charge him with striking. Looking at the vision, it still appears as though Grant was very unlucky to get charged. It didn't seem a reportable offence in my eyes either. Unfortunately for the Dogs, the run in 1997 came to a most brutal end. 5 goals up against the Crows at 3/4 time, the Crows came back and won by 2 points. This denied us a fairy tale grand final between the Dogs and the Saints, who had 2 premierships between them. Instead, the Crows would go on to win the premiership next week, and some classic commentary lines from Sandy Roberts followed this prelim.
There's been so much written and so much said. But the reality is the Dogs have missed out. Malcolm Blight and his men are through. Heartbreaking scenes and heartbreaking times for the Dogs.
Whatever you think of the Dogs at this time, the key message is this. 1997 was a success, and the Dogs were achieving all their key aims when they saved their own club in 1989. Beef was being developed between other clubs, allowing the league to see new rivalries such as the ones the club enjoyed with West Coast as well as Sydney and Adelaide. Meantime, established Melbourne powerhouses now saw the value in beating the Bulldogs, and their newfound reputation as a team you love to hate. And without question, much of it was down to Libba, I reckon. For those who are a bit younger, Libba was the late 90s version of Cameron Ling and Ryan Crowley. You walk taller with him in your team. He was an annoying tagger, just ask Paul Kelly. Kelly was purported to be scratched by Libba, with vision showing Stephen Lawrence also supposedly scratched after round 1 1998. David Smorgon wasn't too pleased about that. The next year in 1999, Libba raised the ire of Brisbane fans when he clawed the face of Craig McRae, earning a 3-week ban. I could tell you so much more about Libba, but we'll get back to him in a moment because he plays a key part in another beef later on. Back to the Bulldogs in general, more great games were served up, only adding to their status in Melbourne. The Dogs and Kangaroos played a classic game to end 1998 which decided top spot, with the Kangas getting up narrowly. It was refreshing to see these two fight it out for superiority after tough financial times for both clubs, merger talks with Fitzroy for both, and eventually the gathering of a group of champion players, which allowed both to be up the top in the late 90s. Unfortunately, both clubs would fall to Adelaide in the finals, the Dogs in the prelim again, and then North Melbourne in the grand final a week later. The Dogs and Blues also developed a rivalry which saw multiple close games develop. In 1999, the Blues and Bulldogs played two absolute thrillers. The first of which raised eyebrows when Carlton coach David Parkin said it was the toughest game he had been involved in 40 years of football. In 2000, things flared up when John Elliott, Carlton president, remarked that the Western Bulldogs had a tragic history in a potshot directed towards Bulldogs club president David Smorgon, which fired the Dogs up to 2 victories over the Blues. The club also raised eyebrows during the 2000 season when the Age reported that the club had to get its act together and work towards a culture change. But who knew that their style of play would also cause one of the all-time great upsets? Sitting pretty at 20-0, Essendon bullied every single club in 2000. Except for one night.
Watch what happens at half-time. Brad Johnson down behind play. And he's not well.
No, Barnesy sort of ran into him with the long...
Scotty Wine just coming there, having a go at it. Big goes. Giving him a belt. It's on. He is having a big go. Moorcroft's come off the bench. He just wanted to have a go at Libba Moorcroft. He's came in and taken him on. Well, could you think of two teams better to have a go? He can't stand up, Brad Johnson, unfortunately. I think he's been concussed. He had the jelly legs when he got up. Did you see it, Dipper?
No, I didn't see it, Bruce. No, not at all.
Oh, look at that. Crediuk and Lloyd having a go at it. The doggies have got him rattled here. Have we got a second half coming up? Gee, I think he's been split open, Libba.
If there are any side that were a match for Essendon physically, it was most definitely the Bulldogs. Employing the super flood which saw Essendon's forward 50 being clogged down, Terry Wallace engineered the best night of his coaching career as he took down the Dogs with his tactics, as well as his team's physicality. And just watch for Brad Johnson having a go at John Barnes after the siren here. Maybe the Bombers were mortal after all, and yeah, there's no reason not to think it didn't inspire Lee Matthews and the Brisbane Lions to get more physical, especially with his "if it bleeds we can kill it" line, and I definitely think it inspired Alistair Clarkson and the Hawks too. Back to the Dogs though. The famous win confirmed their final spot, although this would be a short stay. 2000 would also be their last year of playing in finals until 2006. Remember how I told you Libba still had one more beef in him? Yeah, this is where we're at now. Round 2, 2001. This game saw the Bulldogs bully the Tigers into submission, starting with Libba and Matthew Knights just minutes into the game. Knights had to go off the ground requiring 6 stitches, but wanted to square up with Libba first. Libba for his part claimed it was self-defence, a spontaneous decision and one where he acted instinctively. For his part, he gets suspended for 5 weeks. Years later, Libba said it wasn't exactly self-defence. Anyway, the incident attracted a genuine war of words between the Tigers and the Bulldogs, one which threatened legal action.
The only reason you'd expect a club to condone such appalling conduct would be if a player was acting under instructions.
This issue was resolved, in our opinion, 4 days ago with the tribunal.
By the time the return game in round 17 loomed, there was everything to play for. The Dogs had had an indifferent season, but were clinging to a spot in the 8, while Richmond were fighting for a top 4 spot. The intro to that game was one of the last great intros Channel 7 did before they lost the rights. Let's revisit that, shall we?
So Manny's going in now, look at this. Oh, he's right in there.
Torres in there, players on the ground. Campbell, this is fantastic.
He's got blood all over him, mates. I reacted in self-defence.
We will not just sit back and cop this.
He has been whacked.
Push a man hard enough, and sooner or later, he's sure to push back.
Knights, look at that. That's a horrible scene for Richmond.
Matthew Knights was pushed. So were his Tigers.
We're a proud club and every dog has a day.
Much was said after that round 2 clash. This rematch was marked long ago.
Wait until the next time. Well, the next time's here. Let's see what happens.
Finally, the waiting is over. The talking can now end. Tonight, these Tigers have their chance to push back. For in this game, you can talk all you like, but when it's all said and done, there's only one thing that truly matters, and that is winning the game. Are these Tigers tough enough to give as good as they get? Now is the time to find out.
As for the game itself, it was a ripper. A hard-fought contest that went right down the wire and led to a finish called very well by Bruce McAvaney, leading to a Tigers win which would eventually help them to a top 4 finish and one which deflated the Bulldogs' hopes of a 5th straight final series.
Well, some say they saw the best match they've ever seen last Sunday. I tell you what, this is one of the great contests.
Had it all. It's important the Bulldogs go one-on-one. Can't let any free Tiger players appear.
They'll have one last dip at a contest here, the Doggies. They've got to force them into a contest.
They've done it. They've won the hard one.
This is the most important Richmond win, I reckon, for 20 years. This was a huge challenge for them. You saw the coach's box, the emotion shown there. Had they lost this one, their chances of playing finals were severely...
Eventually the Bulldogs did make good on their 2000 pact of a culture change. No doubt exacerbated by the sacking of Wallace when he indicated a desire to coach Sydney and failed to get the job. But for all that was said about the Dogs at this time, there's no doubt their attitude from 1990 onwards was a defining point in their history. For example, would the 2016 flag have happened without this us against them attitude so soon after their skipper jumped ship? Maybe, maybe not. Were they a dirty side? I don't think they were. They definitely towed the line, but all good sides do that. Brisbane took their model and perfected it. So did Hawthorn. Post-merger talks, the Bulldogs dramatically changed their act to become a team you hated to play against, and you have to respect the club for doing that. Hey everyone, just wanted to say a big thank you to all the boys and girls who've supported my work so far up to this point. Sure there'll be a lot more videos to come, a lot more content, so make sure you give the page a like and subscribe, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more content coming soon. Thank you very much.